Have you ever wondered what it actually takes to have success in the music business? Is it raw talent, being the most talented person? Or is it having connections? Is it who you know? Or maybe it's just pure luck and timing? Well, I was recently inspired by a video that I saw from Dustin from Venture. He does marketing for musicians, and one of the things that he was outlining was this conversation he had with a client where they were talking about, man, it's just so much work to sit there and create content and come up with content ideas, and it takes away from the time I have to do other things I like in music. And Dustin goes, I hear you. That's a pretty big struggle that a lot of us are dealing with, but it takes what it takes. And that phrase, it takes what it takes, really stuck with me, because I'm like, yeah, so many people out there want the music business to be a certain way so that they can have success. Well, if the music business was catered to my specific needs, I'd have more success. It's like, of course you would, but the music business isn't catered to each of our individual needs. So what does it take to actually start seeing results? What are the things that we need to do in order to start to have results in our music business? So in today's video, I'm going to be giving you 4 things that you need to do what it takes to start having more results and more success inside of your independent music business. So let's get right into it. Number 1, the first thing it takes is time, right? And we all understand this, but it's to me, this is one of the biggest commitments, is people aren't willing to put the time aside to actually do the work, to put the time aside to sit down, create the piece of content, to sit down and think of a content idea, to go put an email out there for their email list. That stuff takes time, right? Some people don't want to dedicate the time necessary to build the skills necessary so that they can actually start moving forward in this business. Because here's the thing, nobody starts in the music business perfectly set up. I know some people are like, what about the people who had all the money backing them? I'm talking about the people who are working for it, right? No one is ever handed the perfect set of skills to be a perfectly creative, artistic person and write wonderful and amazing music, and then also be a perfect business mind and understand marketing like a genius. No one usually comes into this business that way. It's usually one or the other. You either have someone who was business minded and marketing minded from the get-go and didn't really care about the music, or you had vice versa, the person who was super attentive to the music and was a purist kind of in a sense about the art form, but doesn't know anything about marketing or business. We all come into the business in this position, but it takes time to actually say, I'm going to commit to learning new skills. I'm going to commit to learning skills that I didn't know before. For instance, whatever your instrument is, put your instrument in the comments. I'd love to know what kind of different instrumental players we have out there, or if you're a producer or something, drop in the comments. I'd love to see that. So you took time to learn the skill that you learned, right? It took hours and hours and hours on end. And let's be honest with each other, because I'm a guitar player and I play a couple other instruments, so I know, didn't we hit a point in our playing where we kind of knew what was up, but we kept going anyway, right? Because we were so obsessed with the instrument, wanted to keep learning more about our craft and keep honing in our craft, right? But we know perfectly well there was a certain time where we hit it and it's like, yeah, I kind of get how this instrument works. Now it's just, how do I learn? It's like the 80-20 rule, right? We learned the 80% of what it takes to play that instrument. Now we're just spending the rest of our time figuring out that last 20%. And that took time, didn't it? But you were able to learn that skill and get to that point where you knew how to do it relatively quickly. I'm assuming it took a few years, right? Which is, honestly pretty conservative when you think about it. Some people, it takes 10 years or longer to really get good at something. But if it takes you like a few years, maybe 5 years to get really good at something, and you've been on that journey, why have we not thought the same way about ourselves about marketing? See, I have this fundamental belief that if you want to learn something, you will figure out how to learn it. And I think you wanted to learn how to play an instrument, or you wanted to learn how to mix, and you wanted to learn how to do all these things related to music. If now you can sit there and say, I have these skills that are valuable, but I don't know how to get them out to the marketplace. Well, that's a skill, being able to get things out to the marketplace. That skill is called marketing. And then there's another component to it, where not only do I got to get my music and my brand and everything out to the marketplace, I got to figure out how to make some money off this. I got to figure out how to turn this into a business. So you got to figure out how to sell and build a sales process that actually turns your brand and your music into a business. So those are skills that take time to learn, You have to dedicate the time necessary to get good at those things, especially with like content. You got to be bad at it long enough to be good at it. Because if you don't ever take the time to be bad at it, you'll never get good at it. And if you never get good at it, you'll never get great at it. But trying to be perfect is ruining a lot of your momentum out there, because you're sitting there wanting everything to be in the perfect scenario for you to take the time to invest to actually make this work. And I know there's a lot of stuff to do. We have a lot of hats to wear in the music business, and it does take some time. But getting militant about your time, having a calendar and really sticking to it, figuring out the times that you can dedicate to your music business, etc., that stuff is insanely powerful, because now you can figure out, I have this amount of time to work on this. I need to get after it because this is my allotted time to do this task. Nothing else can happen except this thing, right? Being very militant with your calendar that you create, right? So you establish what's good for you in your schedule and you make it work, right? But what we don't do is sit around and complain why the world doesn't change for us. The world's not going to change for us. What we need to figure out is how can we navigate the world. We don't have to change for the world, but we got to grow and learn some skills so that we can enter the world and actually be effective, get our music out there, create fans, create relationships and bonds and communities, and people who are willing to support us financially, right? That takes time. So the first T that everyone needs when it comes to doing what it takes is time. You need to take the time to learn what's required, to do what's required. But if we don't ever invest that, we just go, if I feel like it, I'll do it. It'll never happen, right? So what's the second T that we all need to do when it comes to doing what it takes? We need to have the talent. Now this goes into it. Talent can mean a lot of things. Let me be really specific when I say talent. You need talent in, the first one I'm going to talk about is songwriting. Songwriting is going to be the bedrock of your entire music business. I know on this channel, people give me crap all the time about talking about business all the time, but one thing that I've always stood by is that everything you tack on business-wise to your art needs to be on a foundation of some pretty solid music. You can try to build an infrastructure around a polished turd, but in the end, it will still be a turd. I remember there was this one band, I kind of don't want to call their name out because I have some friends that are in different bands and I don't want their name associated with this project, but it was very bad. Let's just put it this way, I'll describe it to you. It was one of these people that wanted to try to become a Disney band, and so they moved from Oklahoma to California to try to become a Disney band and wrote what was, in my opinion, Friday Part 2 as a music video, but no one saw this one. It was really bad. It was really cheesy, and you could tell that it was kind of a cash grab, in effect. And it didn't work out because the foundations weren't there. Here's the thing, if that's what you're going to try to do, you better have songs that impress people and that stand up. But in this situation, they had not taken the time to cultivate the talent of songwriting, right? So this T kind of works with the last one. It's like, what do you dedicate the time to learn? What are the skills that you need to learn? The first one is songwriting, because if you don't have good songs, nothing else matters, okay? Now the next thing, let's say you've got good music, right? You got the music, and even if your music's not perfect, again, that's okay. You're still putting out music and it's getting better and better and better as you release. What do you do now? You got to figure out how to market. So the next skill, the next talent that you need to have is marketing. Okay. When it comes down to becoming a talented marketer, you have to understand what it's all about. Okay? It's about attracting people who would be a great fit while repulsing people who would be a bad fit. Okay? So for instance, if I made a social media post that said, when the metal concert goes ... and there's a video that's a funny meme about, crowd killing or some of the crazy stuff that happens in mosh pits at metal shows, right? All these kind of things, right? That would immediately attract people who are into that heavier type of music and would immediately repulse somebody who is only into pop music and country and non-heavy music, right? So there's this idea in marketing that it's all about like, just say what you need to say so every single person on the planet wants your thing. And to me, that's not good marketing. And that's not really what marketing is. I have enough self-awareness, and hopefully you do as well, to know that your music isn't for everybody. Because something that is for everybody is simultaneously kind of for nobody, in my opinion. Because you write music with this idea of, I'm going to appeal to everyone. You will most likely only appeal to yourself. But if you just try to write music from a genuine place that's relatable, that's a little bit of a different story. So the idea here when it comes to marketing is figuring out who exactly are my dream fans and how do I attract them? And then who are some people that are not in the club that we can kind of repulse? Not because you're trying to be polarizing. You're not going to go out there and say, if you like country, you stink or whatever. You're not going to go that far into the polarizing zone, but you state what you are and who you are, and you stand on that ground confidently. And you don't try to bend who you are to what record labels might think of you and all this kind of stuff that you hear nowadays. That's not what's important. What's important is how your dream fans will perceive you and how you want them to perceive you. So when it comes to your marketing and your branding, which is deeply associated with that, you need to figure out, how do I present myself, present my content, present my music, present everything about myself that will attract that type of person that I know will be a great fan of mine. So for instance, my band that I'm in, bands that are very similar to our sound would be Seven Dust, Chevelle, older Shinedown, Alter Bridge, these kind of hard rock bands, right? So we know exactly who our dream fan is. We know who they are, what they listen to, what things they're into, all that kind of good stuff. Do you know that for your audience? And if not, it's time to start figuring it out. Better late than never, but never late is better. So let's get on that, right? So we need to understand marketing, but marketing alone is not enough. You've got to get good, you got to get talented at selling things. Now, before you freak out, I'm not saying you got to be like, Billy Mays here, and today we're going to... No, it's not what I want you guys to all of a sudden start trying to do. What I want you to figure out, just like marketing, most people have the misconception marketing is saying anything you need to say, lying or whatever, to get people to do the thing or to check out your thing. No. Just like that, people think selling is trying to convince people to buy things they don't want, don't need, and can't afford. And that couldn't be further from the truth either. Selling is really about uncovering the value. This is a quote I heard from Myron Golden. I love this. Is uncovering the value of what you have to offer in a way that helps somebody make a decision. So they will either make the decision, no, this is not for me. And then they will move on. And you just be like, love you too. That's awesome. Like, no hard feelings. You're great. And then someone's like, hey, I want to sign up because this is a good fit for me. And you're like, awesome. You're welcome. Come on, let's go in. So like, you don't come at it from this perspective when you're trying to learn how to sell and become a talented salesperson. I know some people just freaked out. They're like, it's a talented salesperson. I can't believe you said that. I understand that some people find the idea of selling weird, but again, that's because they have a false presupposition about what it means to sell something. Like I said, what about a doctor? You go in to see a doctor, he's going to diagnose you. And if he finds something that's genuinely wrong, he's going to offer you a prescription to help cure that thing. Now, most people don't look at the medicine the doctor gives them, who's trying to earnestly solve their problem, and go, he just wants to make money selling this prescription. I'm going to go find, an alternative method. Some people decide that that's what they want to do. I understand, but I do know a lot of doctors and pharmacists personally who are good people and just want to make sure people have their medication that's going to make them better, right? I know not all medication is created equal, but there are good people out there in the medical industry. And so what you want to think about is like, is that person unethical for selling them the medicine that's going to cure their problem? If you are a fitness instructor and you're talking to someone who is unhealthy into a point where it's going to be fatal to them or detrimental to their health in a very big way, so they have huge medical bills and all this kind of stuff, is it weird or wrong to try to sell them on your program and show them why it's valuable and why they would want to be a part of that? Or maybe they see your presentation and they decide, no, firmly, I like being this way and that's how I want to be. And that's what they decide. But selling is not forcing or lying to or any of this kind of stuff. It's not coercing people. Selling is just attracting the people to your offer by uncovering its value. And so whenever you're selling your songs, your fan clubs, your Patreons, your t-shirts, whatever it happens to be, all getting good at sales, being talented at sales means is figuring out how to uncover that value in a way that gets the people who would be a good fit excited and the people who wouldn't be a good fit out of there anyway. Right? Now, in selling, there is a little bit more of that mindset of like, well, if we can maximize conversions by trying this, maybe we can get some of the people who wouldn't have said yes to say yes. But to me, those are more on the outside, like you're just trying to bump up those extra 1% in conversion type things, as opposed to the core of people that buy to begin with. That's my own perspective on that. So selling is another skill, another talent that you need to have. And the last talent I would say that you need to have is being a good hang. And you think I'm joking, but being able to be a good hang is one of the best skills that you can have when you're trying to network. Because we know how powerful networking can be. You can get opportunities you might not have otherwise gotten if you find the right people that you run into and you network with. I remember I have this sound guy who's a great friend of ours, and he was doing sound for Tool, or one of Maynard James Keenan's bands. I don't remember if it was Tool. And he had a chance to talk with them, and they were just kind of sitting there being casual and just having a little chit chat. And at one point, because he was such a fan, he felt the need, like, okay, I'm going to say it. And he goes, hey, just so you know, like, I've been listening to your stuff for a while, man. It's really cool, man. Yeah, I thought it was really great growing up. It was good stuff. And then Maynard was like, you were cool until you said that. Now, Maynard is kind of known for being blunt and dry humor like that, so he wasn't like totally tearing our buddy down, but he was kind of letting him know, kind of like, dude, you kind of ruined it, in a sort of dry Norm Macdonald sort of way. But there was a lesson there, which is he kind of broke one of the cardinal rules of hanging out with people who would be great networking opportunities, and that's gushing. When you gush, that's an immediate status lowering thing that happens in their brain, because not saying that they look down on their fans, right? But they don't consider fans to be their peers. Now, if you're hanging out with somebody in the music business and they're just chit-chatting with you, they're kind of peers with you, right? They're sort of peers with you because you're all in the music business together. We're all serving different roles to make a show happen and entertain people, right? But as soon as my buddy said, hey, I've been listening to your stuff for a while and it just really influenced me a lot, and I just, it was really cool, he immediately lowered his status by putting him in the position of being looked at as a fan as opposed to a peer, right? So that was like a cardinal sin that my buddy committed. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, yep, I wouldn't have said that either. I would have just not said that at all. I would have felt those feelings and appreciated the moment, but I would not have said those things. Because it's not that like giving somebody a compliment is a bad idea, but there's a way to do it. Like, hey, great set tonight. It sounded really good out there, man. As opposed to, dude, that was an amazing set. Like, you guys are my favorite band, and like every time I see you, you see what I'm saying? The difference in positioning there, of like, oh yeah, good set tonight, man. It sounded really good out there. And then you're not really that attached to it. You're kind of dissociated from it, and you're just like, oh yeah, what are you guys doing now? You guys gonna go get some food or something? Like, maybe not like say it in a way like, hey, I'm gonna come with, but just like, oh, what's next? Next town? Are you guys getting some grub before you go? Or you guys already eat? Oh yeah, whatever. Like trying to be casual about it, not trying to be so invested in it that you're like, hi, how's it going? But just, you're networking with people that could be not just potentially great opportunities for your career, but genuinely good people. Because that's one of the coolest things I found out. I was on tour with Seven Dust in 2019, and we were out on tour with Tremonti, which is the guitar player for Creed and Alter Bridge. And that was a really cool experience for me to go on tour with them, and he would compliment our band and say these things, and we'd be like, oh my gosh, this is just really cool. And we met, just by networking and being cool, we met his guitar tech. And we call him Frosty. And his guitar tech was one of the most down-to-earth, cool people I've ever met in the music industry. Mark was really cool as well. But Frosty was such a cool dude, and it's like, there's so many good people in this business. I know the business gets a bad rap, but to me, that's more of the industry executives and the people that work within the industry. But the people that work in the business, the artists, their crew, those people to me are a lot more down to earth and good people to hang around. Some of the best tours I've been around is like hanging around some of the sound guys and the guitar techs and the drum techs and all these people, because they're so cool, man. So learning how to just hang back and not be so, I can't believe I'm in this opportunity to talk to somebody like this, oh my God, and just kind of being like, oh, that's a cool dude, and just be friendly. Just try to become friendly. That is a skill. It takes some work, right? Practice with your fans. Practice being really chill and friendly with your fans. Great way. I mean, you need to build rapport with them too. It's not just people who could give you an opportunity. So practice on your fans in the comment section, in DMs, in gigs, in person, right? All those different ways you need to practice your networking. Okay, let's move on to the third T that it takes to actually start seeing some results and have some success, in your music business. This third one is tenacity. Okay, tenacity is that drive to push through all the roadblocks that are inevitably going to come your way. So many people are going through this business and they're expecting, like I mentioned earlier, the business to be easy or laid down for them whenever they're trying to do something. And that's not going to happen. It takes a lot of short-term, actually I shouldn't say short-term, it takes a lot of upfront, that's the word I meant, upfront investment from a time perspective, from a money perspective. It takes a lot of time, money, and effort upfront to build something that will inevitably return. And here's the problem with a lot of artists. That can be a trap if you don't know what you're doing. If you're trying to go out there and say, okay, I'm going to invest a lot of time into my music business up front because eventually it's going to pay off. We're in the right zone, but where are you investing that time and energy in the short term, or up front, I should say, to get that long-term result? Well, a lot of artists don't figure that part out. They have the idea that I'm going to commit to it, but they don't commit to figuring it out. There's a difference between committing to do something and committing to figuring out how to do something. Those are two different thoughts. One of them is just, I'm going to go start acting. I'm going to start taking action. But the information that's backing that action is just what you knew to begin with, which, remember what I said in the beginning, very few of us start out knowing everything about business and everything about music. So we're going out there making decisions that aren't totally informed, but we're acting, and we'll do that for 5-10 years, and then we'll like, I guess it didn't work. Well, it's like, it's not that it couldn't work or that it wouldn't work. It's that we were working on things that weren't really moving the needle. We weren't working on building our audience in a way that was effective. We weren't working on figuring out how to turn this into a business. Because like I said, figuring out how to do it is not the same as just committing to do it. So it takes a lot of upfront investment in the right things to yield that long-term result, which is why I'm such a big fan of financial education, business and entrepreneurship education. That's one of the big things that we understand. Big upfront investment for long-term payoff. And that requires tenacity. That requires you to not be discouraged. That requires tenacity to be put in the position to take all the blows that the music business is going to throw at you and still keep going even when times are tough, right? That requires tenacity. Now, another reason you need tenacity is you're going to get negative feedback. Not because I'm making a personal statement about you watching this, but because inevitably, because you're on the internet, you are going to receive negative feedback. And you know what? It always kind of affects you. I would be lying to you if I told you that some of those negative comments that I get don't irritate or frustrate me. Because though I understand sometimes they're coming from a place of not understanding or misunderstanding what I said, it's hard as a human being not to be emotionally involved when people are saying negative things about you. It's the way our brains are wired, okay? So it requires a certain type of tenacity to be able to get negative criticism and still just be like, okay, do you think that's going to change what I'm doing? I'm going to still keep doing what I'm doing. And you know what? Because you said something, I'm doing it even harder now. You didn't like my ad about my music? I'm going to make sure you get all my ads. You know what I mean? Like, it takes a certain kind of tenacity to have that personality. And so that's a talent to cultivate, you could say, is being tenacious and being able to withstand the rough points of this industry. And a lot of that comes down to emotional management. Like understanding what your emotions, like where they come from, how to control and regulate them. Because a lot of times our emotions that make us make bad decisions come from places like our ego, pride, right? I've noticed in my own life and in artists I've worked with, sometimes pride can be a big thing that's holding us up because our emotions are getting in the way of clear thinking and acting clear. That requires tenacity to look at your brain and say, okay, I am not just my feelings. I am not just my thoughts. Okay? I can control these. And when someone says something negative about my music, I can control how I react to it. It's that old Stoic philosophy. I believe it was Seneca, which is, it could be Marcus Aurelius. I can't control pay no mind to what you can't control. Only focus on what you can control. So I can't control people getting into my comments section and saying negative things about me and call me an albino Taliban, was someone called me one time. I was like, A+ for creativity, I guess, right? You know what I mean? But like, to be able to see that and say, how am I going to react to that? I'm either going to laugh about it or I'm going to blow it off. But one of the ththings I can choose to do is not give it the time of day to be like, why would someone say this about me? Oh, I'm feeling emotional. I don't have to do that. I can look at that and be like, wow, someone took their time. Their time is very valuable, and they took their precious time to waste commenting an encyclopedia of hate on my video. Well done, right? So emotional management allows us to reframe these things that happen to us so that we can have that sort of tenacity needed to push through the roadblocks. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to the last and final thing that every single person needs to do what it takes to have success in the music business. And that's have a trajectory. Have a place that you understand where you're going, okay? Understand where you're going. A lot of people don't take the time to understand a couple things. One, where are you going now? Like, where are you going in the short term? Okay, what's short term? That can be kind of relative, can it? So in the short term, I want you to think in the next 12 months. I know that's not very short, but that's in the terms of goal setting and trajectory of a career, a year is a short period of time. And so I want you to look at 12 months and say, what are the goals that I'd like to achieve? And I'll talk about this in a second. What are the inputs that I need to put in to get going on those goals? So you look at your short-term goals and say, okay, this is what I want, and this is what I need to do to get that. Then we need to start working on doing all the things that we need to do, like I talked about, dedicating the time to make content, emails for your email list, going and doing gigs, networking with people, all the different things that we need to do in the short term. We need to write those things out. And then we need to identify, okay, in a year, like I'll have X amount of listeners. Okay, that means I need to have this many listeners a month. And so you can start to reverse engineer the math to figure out what are the milestone metrics you need to start hitting on your way to your goal. So that's your short-term perspective, but you also need to have a trajectory for a long-term perspective. You need to be kind of thinking like a chess player. You need to be thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead of everybody else. That's kind of one of the things that defines a really great artist who's been able to adapt with the times and move the right chess pieces. I'm going to give an example that some people find a little cheesy because they're a little bit on the older side of this equation, but the Bee Gees. The Bee Gees were a great band at figuring out in the long term, what are we going to do to pivot and shift to be able to handle what's happening in the world right now. So if you listen to the Bee Gees when they very first started, they sounded very much like a Beatles-esque band. They wrote music in that Beatles rock sort of vibe. But then as time went on, they moved to Florida and they got exposed to the disco scene in Miami. And then they started figuring out, how can I write some more dance-related music? And then they got asked to do a soundtrack for a movie. And they're like, that sounds cool. We'll do some dance music for a movie. And then it happened to be the biggest selling album in the world at that time, right? Now, every radio station only has like 10 or 12 spots for songs on their playlist. And then there's 5 Bee Gees songs on them. Can you imagine half the playlist of what you're listening to all day long is the Bee Gees? Because there's only 10 songs available and 5 of them are Bee Gees. It got to the point where they were so saturated in the market that there was Bee Gee free days on radio stations. Like, we're not going to be playing the Bee Gees all day today. And they're like, yay! They're not playing the same song over and over again. And then it got to the point where people kind of didn't like the Bee Gees anymore. And so they, instead of doing the same disco thing, they started to adapt. They started to evolve. They started to change their position and evolve into more of an 80s kind of sound, a more modern 80s pop sound that we would associate with the 80s sound. And then as time evolved, they started pivoting into more of the 90s sound of pop. And they were one of those bands that always sort of stayed a few steps ahead of everybody. So that when stuff happened in the music business, they were able to pivot because they knew exactly what the long-term goal was. Some people are so focused on the short-term goals. And then here's the other thing about long-term goals. You have to think about them on a longer time horizon. So short-term goals, you're maybe thinking every year. Long-term goals, you're thinking about every 5 years. So that's a different way of looking at things. When you say, okay, this year I'd like to make this progress so that by the next year I can make this progress. You have to think about it a little differently with long-term. You have to think about, okay, in 5 years, where should we be? And then at that point, what needs to happen to go to that next level? That's a different type of thinking. And if you start thinking like that, you're going to start thinking like how some of the most successful artists have been thinking about things, because they don't just think about their music business in the term of like one day at a time. I opened up my Spotify app and got a couple streams. Look at me, how'd you do? No, that's not what they do. They have a trajectory and a goal and an outline for where they want to go, not just in that year, but in the next 5 years, right? So what I would do to help start taking action on everything I'm talking about here is to identify your bottlenecks, your roadblocks, the things that are holding you up. Because a lot of the times the only things that's separating you from your goals, once you take the time to outline them like this, usually the only thing that's separating us is taking action on those bottlenecks. And if we can start to identify what those roadblocks are, what the bottlenecks are, you can start to attack them one by one, get past them. And now it's just all about doing what it takes, right? Just like this video has been outlining. So remember, the 4 T's that it takes to do, the 4 T's that you need to know to do what it takes to have success in the music business are time, talent, tenacity, and trajectory, right? You got to take the time commitment to actually do what's required. You got to build up the skills that actually matter, like songwriting, selling, marketing, networking, those kind of things. You got to have tenacity to deal with all the crap that you're going to get thrown in this business, whether it's from cheap stuff from the industry or competition in your local scene, people being petty, playing favorites, whatever it is. You're going to have to learn how to be tenacious and fight through those things. And then 4, you need to have a trajectory that you understand that you're going to be going in your career. And by understanding those 4 things, and most importantly, by taking action on those things, and like I mentioned, identifying the roadblocks and the bottlenecks and how to fix those things, now you're going to start to see results and start to actually move forward in your music business. Now, speaking of bottlenecks, one of the things that we have in the description is an application to hop on a call to work with us one-on-one to help you with those bottlenecks and start working with you one-on-one to help you with your music business. If that's something you're interested in, you can click the link in the description. If you got some value from today's video, make sure to drop a comment, hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, all that good YouTube-y stuff. It really helps out the channel. In fact, if you know a musician that would value from this video a lot, be sure to share it. And I look forward to seeing you guys on another Musicians Ignite. Take care.